Today on the Family Answer Man, we're answering your questions about codependency and about the effect of opposite attraction from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orgis here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man. This time is designed to answer questions commonly asked in both the counseling and church settings. Our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years and experience of education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, happier family. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. Days Meat Market is located at 35770 LA Highway 16 in Denham Springs, and we are incredibly thankful for both. This show is not a therapy session, nor is the advice specific to your situations. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be, and often are, very complicated and dynamic. For more in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counseling specific to your unique circumstances. We hope this episode of Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. I'm David Orgis, and I am here today as your host. I have a master's in professional counseling, 18 years in ministry, and have been married for almost 11 years now. And I am here with our expert, the Family Answer Man, Dr. Mark Crosby, who has his PhD in family psychology, his master's in clinical counseling, a master's of education in pastoral counseling and theology, a master in law with a focus in mediation, and he is a licensed professional counselor, a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. Well, welcome, Dr. Mark. And why don't you talk to a little bit to our listeners today about what have been some of the most rewarding moments that you've had in this area of either ministry or psychology and being there for people.
Right. I mean, one of the great things I think any of us can do is to be an influence, a positive influence in someone else's life. Coaches, teachers, social workers, therapists, pastors, physicians, attorneys, anyone who's in the helping profession knows that when you're helping someone get through a difficult time, when you're helping especially good people who are struggling with in hard times, get through those times, that's very wonderful. It's such a rewarding thing. And it's something we all need. We've all been there. We've all had those moments where we needed someone to answer our questions, to be there for us during difficult times. And so when we do this sort of work, whether it be in person or even what we're doing now on the air, it's a rewarding moment. It's a grateful moment because, again, you are doing what I believe the Lord called you to do. That is to be of help, to be of service, to minister, to cry with those who are crying, and to laugh with those who are laughing. And so this is a wonderful thing that we do. And again, it's something that I enjoy, especially working with families. One thing that sometimes we forget is that when you read the Word of God, you discover that the Bible begins with marriage in Genesis, but it also ends with marriage, with the Lord and the church in Revelation. And every book in between, there is some sort of, thought or reference to Christ and His church, to God and Israel, to that relationship that is so powerful and so wonderful and so strong within the covenant that God has created. So marriage is, again, a definite important part of who we are, what we do, and of the Word of God.
And that's one of the things that's been so beneficial about just these few short weeks that we have been on air and had this show so far is to hear some of the feedback that we've gotten and some of the questions. We're going to answer some of those questions today that have come directly from listeners that I think were spurred on by maybe some previous discussions that we've had. And so it's always good for us to hear. If you would like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at familyanswerman@loumc.org or at soundradioinfo@milldale.org. And you can email your questions in, and we will try to get those answered for you.
Right. We'd love to hear from you. If this program is helpful, if the information we're giving is helpful, if you're able to maybe apply this even in your own life or your own ministry. Many pastors I know listen to the program, and so this could be helpful to you in your ministry, in your pastoral counseling role, or in your sermon preparation. I hope and pray that this will be a benefit to you and to all of our listeners.
All right. Well, let's get started today. And this question definitely came from one of the questions that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We discussed the topic of narcissism and how that impacts a marriage. Well, the question that was written in from a listener is, how does having a codependent spouse affect a marriage?
Wow. Well, codependency is one of those words that you hear a lot in various psychological circles, many of your self-help books, which are often very good to read and very helpful, use the word codependency. However, codependency in the psychological world, if you will, is more of a description than a diagnosis. So you will not find the word codependency in the diagnostic manual. As a matter of fact, there are many descriptions of codependency. And again, it's more of a description than anything, but there's no one strong consensus or definition of codependency. With that being said, I will argue that a good definition that I've read and that I've used of codependency is when you have a need to be needed. When there's this need inside of you to be needed. In other words, I find my worth in being needed. And the reality is, it's good to be needed. I mean, we all want to make a difference. We all want to hopefully be helpful to someone else. But when it becomes an unhealthy desire for approval, as one person put it, when you are addicted to approval, when you want everyone to like you, when you want to tell everyone yes, when there is a willingness to allow yourself to be abused for the sake of being liked or for the sake of being or having someone's approval, that is when it becomes a problem. That's when codependency becomes problematic. For some, it's the hope of changing someone or helping someone, again, at their expense. In other words, I will help you. I will be there for you. And it doesn't matter if I'm being abused. It doesn't matter if I'm being hurt. It doesn't matter if I'm putting myself in harm's way. And that's when codependency becomes a problem. Another description is this, and this will, I think, ring loud and clear for many of our listeners, and that is codependency may be seen as a person who says yes all the time. In other words, I've got to say yes because I want to make everybody happy. Now, how many moms or how many pastors or how many husbands or how many wives have been down that road that says, I just have to say yes because if I say no, someone will be upset with me. If I say no, someone may not like me. Or if I say no, someone may get their feelings hurt. And so that is a description, if you will, of codependency. Now, what I learned a long time ago, because I was one of those individuals that just felt like I had to say yes all the time to everybody until I had a wonderful mentor say to me, he said, if you don't say no sometimes, especially when you have to or need to, then he said, your yes has no value.
Wow.
He said, if you don't say no sometimes, then your yes has no value. And that really rung true with me. And that just really stuck with me. And so I was able then to learn how to say no, not just for the sake of saying no. There's some people who do that. But sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you cannot go to that meeting. Sometimes you cannot go to that particular event. Sometimes you cannot be there at 6 a.m. to open up with prayer for a particular group or organization. Sometimes you just have to say, no, I'm sorry, I just cannot do that. So the question here is, how does codependency affect a marriage? Well, when the codependent person allows themselves to be hurt or abused in the marriage, that's when it becomes problematic. Again, a mantra that I will say and share without apology, and that is this. There's no excuse for abuse. There is no excuse for abuse. And so what happens is when the codependent wife or sometimes the codependent husband allows themselves to be abused or hurt with the hopes of changing their spouse or making things better, when you're allowing yourself to be abused or hurt, that is when it affects the marriage. That's when it impacts the person because the reality is there is no excuse for abuse. Or when a codependent person makes excuses or covers up for their spouse. How many times has a wife said to me, hey, look, his boss called, my husband's boss called in and said, hey, where's your husband? And I said he had the flu, but no, he didn't have the flu. He was, intoxicated from last night, or he was strung out on drugs, or he left us, or whatever. In other words, when the codependent person makes excuses or covers up, toxic or abusive behavior.
So do codependents typically notice their own behavior? I know for narcissists, we talked about that. It's very difficult for people to notice their own behavior and tendencies. What about somebody that's codependent?
The codependent people, and I'll say this, a person who struggles with what we're calling today codependency, they are generally, I will argue, my experience, they are generally good people. They want to be liked. They want to be helpful. They want to be involved. They want to be invested. They want to help people go through or get through tough times. They want to help people, overcome. So they're generally, I will argue, good people. They have, as our grandmothers would say, a good heart. But the reality is they take it much further than God ever intended for it to go, meaning they allow themselves to, again, take on the abuse or to stay involved in a toxic situation, or they allow themselves to cover up what needs to be exposed. They allow themselves, allow this person to not face the consequences that they need to face for the behaviors that, again, are ongoing. So, again, by not allowing themselves to expose, by not allowing themselves to share what's going on, by covering up, nothing ever gets better. And so they think they're helping, they think they're changing their spouse, but they're really not. They're actually making things worse in many cases. So do they see that about themselves? Yes, I think they do, but they see themselves as being helpful. They see themselves as being willing and wanting to make a difference. And what's happening is, in many cases, again, we've heard this from our family and parents and grandparents, they're doing more harm than good.
So with that being said, and we've talked a lot about boundaries so far on this program and how important they are, and also how difficult they can be to establish for someone that is codependent, that does have that good heart, somebody that is caring, somebody that is compassionate, somebody that wants to be there for others and rescue those that are hurting, and bring them into a place where, the codependent doesn't want to see harm to others. They want to see others brought out of that harm. So for that person, can you, I guess for their benefit, kind of run through that criteria again of what does it look like when good-hearted, just good Christian sacrifice, self-sacrifice and service can translate and kind of cross that bridge into an unhealthy behavior? What are some of those criteria again?
Again, we want to be helpful. We want to be there for others. We want to be helpful to others. We want, as you used the word a while ago, in some cases, we want to rescue others. However, but when you're trying to help someone, when you're trying to be there for someone, when you're trying to even rescue someone, when you're putting yourself or your family or your finances or whatever it may be in harm's way consistently, or when you are allowing that person to continue to count on you to bail them out whenever they are intoxicated or strung out or constantly finding themselves in jail or whatever it may be, when you are constantly trying to help them and you are being abused in the meantime, you are losing finances, you are being put in harm's way, when you're involved in such a way that you are finding yourself hurting, being abused, being taken advantage of, that is when codependency becomes a problem. Again, most codependent people are good people with good hearts, but they sometimes do not know where the boundary is. And they will cross lines and cross boundaries and allow themselves to be hurt in ways that maybe they never should. And the person they're trying to help, in 90% of the cases, I will argue, never gets better. They never get better. They stay involved with that substance. They stay involved with that other person. They stay involved in that very unhealthy behavior, and they never get better because they know and believe that that codependent person in their life will bail them out, will lie for them, will create excuses for them. And because of that, they never get better.
So the short-term rescuing from the codependent actually creates often more long-term harm to those that they're trying to help.
Exactly. And again, what I see often, and this is, again, something that is unfortunate, but when a spouse is trying to change their spouse who doesn't want to change, when a wife is trying to change her husband because he has maybe a problem with alcohol or drug addiction, or he has a problem maybe with other areas of life, and she's trying to change him, but he doesn't want to to change, that creates heartache in her life. That creates problems in her life. She becomes frustrated, tired, disappointed, disillusioned. And when that happens, many people will then give up on everything. In other words, they tried to make a difference in their spouse's life. They tried to rescue them. They tried to help them overcome whatever alcohol or drug dependency. And then it never gets better. And so they get frustrated, tired, disappointed, disillusioned, and then they give up on everything. They give up on their marriage. Sometimes they give up on their faith. Sometimes they give up on everything they once held dear because they just believe that if I was good enough, if I was nice enough, if I was sweet enough, if I made enough excuses, they would get better, and they don't.
Wow. So it's really important then to be in a position where we can acknowledge when we obviously Jesus came to serve and not to be served. We want to follow in Jesus' footsteps. We want to serve others, but we don't want to put ourselves and our family and loved ones and our, like you said, our finances and just our world at risk and in jeopardy of falling apart to enable somebody's behavior when we're not actually helping that person heal.
And and I can hear what some of the, so to speak, what some of our listeners are saying right now. Jesus did say go the extra mile, no doubt about it. Jesus did say turn the other cheek, no doubt about it. But Jesus also said, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Don't say yes and be no and mean no, and don't say no and mean yes. And that is what I will argue is the beginning stage or description of codependency. When you cannot say no to someone, when you always feel like you have to say yes. Pastors, I think, who are listening need to be aware of their own codependency because we all want to be liked and we always want to say yes. And we all want to be approved by people in the church and even in the community. But approval addiction, always wanting to be liked, always having to say yes, will always, in my opinion, will lead to some sort of abuse. And even Jesus again said, he said, beware when everyone likes you. Woe unto those who, again, are liked by everyone. Because the reality is, if you're following Jesus, if you are living according to the Word, there are going to be those who don't like you. There are going to be those who are not going to put up with you. There are going to be those who insult you and say all kind of manner of evil against you. And so, again, the codependent person tries to avoid that reality. But again, there lies the problem. If you say yes to everyone and you don't let your yes be yes, your no be no, you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to find yourself hurting, frustrated, and it's going to negatively impact your marriage.
That's a great answer and great advice. I think is going to help a lot of people be able to start to establish some of those boundaries and some of that healthy yes and the healthy no,
no doubt,
that you talked about. We're going to move on to our next question, and this is another question that was written in, and it has a little similar theme to it as well, and it's this. I am very outgoing, and my spouse is the opposite. How should a couple walk through that? Because it can potentially kill a marriage. So talk a little bit about opposite attraction and where that can lead.
Wow. Billy Graham said one time, he said that he and his wife were opposites in many areas. He talked about them having differences in various parts of their life, and that they were, in some ways, happily incompatible.
Happily incompatible.
So,
I like that.
I thought that was interesting to note. But the reality is this. We meet people, we fall in love, oftentimes with someone who may be different in personality, may have a difference of opinion as far as various topics, who may find other things interesting. A very simple example is that there's some people who like the beach and some people who like the mountains, okay? And if you're a mountain person and you meet a person who likes the beach, you may find that interesting at first. Because, hey, I always go to the mountains and you like the beach, so I find that interesting. And so that interest begins to create this attraction. And so the point I'm making is that sometimes when we first meet, that balance is important. In other words, some people like country western music and others may like, I don't know, pop or whatever. And so that difference you find interesting and it creates a balance. And the old saying goes, and again, we've heard this time and time again, opposites attract. And that's true, they do. But then they repel. I'll say that again. Opposites attract, and then they repel. And so one of the first things you have to ask yourself, in the early stages of dating or of marriage that I think is very important is, does the person that you are falling in love with, do they make you laugh? I think that's a very important question to ask. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at the basics of our life or what makes life come together, you discover some things. That there's 5 things that we need. Number 1, we need the basic necessities of life: food, clothing, shelter. Most of us have that. But also we want to love and be loved. Thirdly, we want to have some power over our life. Fourthly, we want some freedom in our life. But last of all, we all want and need fun in our life. We forget that sometimes. We are wired to have fun. Even the Bible talks about laughter being good medicine. So the reality is we're called to have fun in our life. And so again, opposites attract and then they repel unless the couple makes the adjustment. You see, when you are falling in love and there's that balance and there's that interest and you like this, but I like that, and find that kind of interesting and that draws us together, yes, if we're not careful, we will eventually repel because I want to go to the mountains or I want to go to the beach. And so you're kind of back and forth. And so you have to make that adjustment or you will begin to feel as if we are now repelling. We're now walking away. We are detaching from one another. And so what I have to share, what I have to tell my clients many times is, you now have to choose when you're starting to feel this way to get into each other's world. Okay? I think it was that great philosopher Gladys Knight who said, I would rather be in his world than live without him in mine. Okay? And so the point is that you have to choose now to get into the world of the other person. So if you love the mountains, but she loves the beach, it's okay to say, you know what, we're going to go to the beach. I want to go with you. I want to be with you. I'm not crazy about the beach, in your heart and mind, but because she is, you go with her to the beach.
Right.
And then the following year or the following month or whatever, she may not be crazy about the mountains. It's cold. It's, scary driving those mountain roads, whatever. But because he loves the mountains, I'm going with him. So my point is, you have to now make that adjustment and choose to participate and to support whatever the other person likes and wants.
Right. And I know for me, I tell people I have 2 shades of skin tone, either Casper or crawfish. And so when we go to the beach, I bring a tent.
Yeah.
Because that's not my jam, but that is my wife's. And so, but Gladys Knight, I would rather be with her than
be without her.
Right. In my own little world.
Yeah.
So, theoretically, you can either find a mountain island, go to Hawaii and ski one day and surf on the same day, or what are some of the things that you would say, because, being a beach or a mountain person might not necessarily be a deal breaker in a marriage. What are some of the things that people may need to look out for to see as warning signs, things that might be a deal breaker? Right. Mountain, beach, we can compromise on that. What are some of the things that you may not be able to compromise on?
For example, I know a lot of men who, for example, love to golf or they love to fish, for example. And their wives are going, hey, but I would rather us do something else. Again, wives, who have husbands who golf, go with them golfing. Drive the golf cart. You may not, like to golf, but go with them. You can drive the golf cart. You can bring your phone or a book. You can hang out. You can at least show some interest. Guys, if your wife, loves to shop, okay. Go with her, find something you like. In other words, it's not about so much the activity, it's about the person. And sometimes that's what we forget in marriage, that it's choosing to participate, it's choosing to support, it's choosing to be with the person. One of the great red flags that I see is when a couple says to me, yeah, I'm in my living room watching the ball game, and she is in, the dining room, playing on her computer. And I'm thinking, that's a red flag, Because in those moments each evening, one of the great things, one of the most important things, again, is to find and reconnect that attachment. You've been away all day. Both have been at work, perhaps. Both have been dealing with the kids, perhaps. Both have had their own hobbies, whatever. And here's that last couple of hours each evening, and that is when you need to reattach, reconnect. She may not like the ball game. He may not like, some game she's playing on the computer. But when you participate with her in that game, when you sit down, ladies, and you have no interest in who's on TV playing football or baseball, but you're sitting next to him, that creates that attachment, that reconnection that needs to happen each and every day.
So I love the phrase that you said, it's not about the activity, it's about the person.
Exactly.
That's so important.
And the thing is, people say to me, but I don't like, Mexican food, but she likes Italian food, and I don't like Mexican food, but I like Italian food, so I don't want to go to the Mexican restaurant, but she likes, and here's the thing, you can find something at that Mexican restaurant that you can eat. You can find something.
A burger off the kids' menu.
Exactly. It's, again, and the reality that we have to keep reminding ourselves is the moment you get married, the moment I got married, life's not about us anymore. Now, the reality is we fall into that trap. We want it to be about us. It's, it's what I want. It's where I want to go. I work hard. I deserve. And I get that. But at the end of the day, it's so powerful and so important to say, I want to do something for her. I want to do something for him.
Right. Now, so I know what people are going to ask. Well, what about the girls' trip, the guys' trip, vacations away, or short trips? What about that?
I think when a marriage is strong and when a marriage is healthy, for example, I think that can definitely be a reality. And especially on short term, and especially if it's something that, hey, it's only for 2 or 3 days, for a long weekend, whatever. Spend that time, enjoy that fellowship. And when you come back, talk about it and share it, and bring a souvenir back to your spouse or whatever. Let them know you were thinking about. Stay in touch while they're away. So that's not problematic as long as, again, it's not the norm. In other words, next weekend is our weekend, or whatever, or next 2 weeks from now we're going to go do something fun or exciting, or this is what we discovered while we were visiting. I think you'd like this. Why don't we go, in a couple of weeks? So make it, again, a healthy part of the relationship. Bottom line, find that one thing and take time to invest in it together, whatever that one thing is, and take time to invest in it. And if you are creative, and if you are seeking, and if you are willing, you'll find it. I believe you will. And that's what, again, helps, no matter who you are, no matter how opposite you may be, to find that common ground that brings you together.
So you're not sacrificing yourself as an individual, but you are doing what the Bible talks about, where we leave, we cleave, we grow together as one brand new flesh. Find the one thing and focus on the person, not the activity.
Yeah, and saying to your spouse, and this is something we all want to hear, and that is, when we say to our spouse, I want you to be happy, I want to please you, I want to be there for you, and she's saying that to you. When spouses say that to each other, that's what we all want. That's what we all desire. And when we're doing that for each other, we're filling each other's, love tank, if you will, and life really feels better.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mark. Those answers were, I think, really insightful and are going to be incredibly helpful. We also want to say thank you to you as a listener again for joining us today. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air, again, is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. And Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats is located at 35770 Highway 16 in Denham Springs. And as a final reminder, this is not a therapy session, nor is this advice specific to you and your situation. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be and often are very complicated and dynamic. For more in-depth answers to your questions, we really encourage you to seek out professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. We hope that this episode of The Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make the changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. To have Dr. Mark answer your questions, you can email us at familyanswerman@loumc.org or soundradioinfo@milldale.org.